Prince Edward had maintained his silence for 27 years, but his revelation on Diana's death anniversary brought King Charles to tears, because Edward had witnessed the real suffering Diana experienced in the palace all alone, but had never told anyone. August 31st, 2024, was the 27th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. Family members had quietly gathered at Buckingham Palace. King Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry. Everyone was alone with their own memories. But Prince Edward was different that day. Edward, the quietest member of the royal family, would normally stay in the background at such gatherings. However, today, there was a different determination in his eyes. Edward, at 60, was no longer young. He felt that the time had come to speak the truths he had observed and kept inside for years. After the private family meeting ended, Edward approached Charles. "Charles, there are important things I need to discuss with you privately." "About Diana," he said. Charles was surprised. Edward rarely spoke about Diana. "Of course, Edward. Let's talk in my private office." The two brothers moved to the quiet office at Clarence House. Charles saw the serious expression on Edward's face. Edward sat across from Charles. After a long silence, he began to speak. "Charles, I've been hiding something from you for 27 years. What Diana went through, the difficult days she spent in the palace, I saw it all. But I never told anyone." Charles frowned. "What do you mean, Edward?" "Diana wasn't alone, Charles. At least not completely alone. I was always there, silently, but I was there." Edward's voice began to tremble. "You were very busy in those days. Your royal duties, responsibilities. You couldn't see how lonely Diana was, but I could see it." Charles listened to his brother in amazement. Edward continued, "I saw her crying late at night. When she walked alone in the palace corridors, so helpless she couldn't talk to anyone. I saw it all, Charles." Edward began telling the memories he had kept for years, one by one. "Do you remember the periods when Diana was struggling with bulimia? You weren't even aware of it, but I saw her coming out of the bathrooms, her eyes swollen, her face pale. My heart ached." Charles's face changed. "Edward, you knew?" "Yes, I knew. And I was trying to help her. Of course I wasn't a doctor, but I was trying not to leave her alone." Edward became even more emotional. "One of those difficult nights, Diana was sitting in the kitchen crying. I kept her company. When I asked, 'Why are you sitting here, Diana?' she said, 'Nobody understands me, Edward.' That night we talked for hours. The pressure she felt, the stress from the media, the feeling of not finding her place in the family. I listened to it all." Charles was crying now. "Why didn't you tell me, Edward?" "Because she asked me not to tell you. She said I can tell Edward because he doesn't judge me." Edward continued to tell how he supported Diana. When William and Harry were very young, Diana would try to play with them, but sometimes she would be very tired. I would step in. I would say, "Diana, you rest. I'll take care of the children." Most of the time I would make it seem like official duty, but actually I wanted to give her relief. I could see what a good mother Diana was, but also how exhausted she got. Charles asked curiously, "What else did you do?" "Do you remember the periods when Diana was involved in charity work? Hospital visits, aid organizations? She would often go alone because nobody supported her. I would secretly follow her, for her safety, for support. Diana didn't know this, but I was always nearby." Edward's eyes filled with tears. "I saw her touch with people, Charles. How she hugged AIDS patients, how she cared for homeless children. That woman was an angel." Edward continued to tell about Diana's most difficult periods. "Do you remember the periods when she learned about the situation with Camilla? Diana was completely devastated in those days, but nobody seemed to give her real support. One day I found her in the garden. She was sitting and crying. 'Why doesn't anyone love me, Edward?' she asked. There was so much pain in her voice. Charles couldn't hold himself anymore. Edward, I didn't know what I was doing back then. I know, Charles. You were also struggling with difficulties. But Diana didn't understand this. She just wanted to be loved, to be understood. Edward told in more depth. During that period, Diana's sleep pattern was completely disrupted. I would see her walking in the palace corridors at 2 to 3 a.m., as if she couldn't find peace. Once when I came across her, I asked, "Can't you sleep, Diana?" She said, "Thoughts are constantly spinning in my head, Edward. I think I'm losing Charles, that my children will also drift away from me." That night we had tea together. We talked for hours. Diana told me, "Edward, sometimes I feel like I'm not part of this family at all, as if I'm a stranger and everyone is excluding me." Edward's voice trembled. One of the most painful moments was when I caught Diana looking at wedding photos. She was going through old albums, trying to remember her happy days. Tears were flowing from her eyes. "Were those days real, Edward?" she asked. "Was I really happy, or was I deceiving myself?" She was so fragile, as if she would shatter with one touch. Edward continued. "During that period, Diana constantly talked to me about you. She would say, 'I still love Charles, but he doesn't want me anymore. I've become a burden to him.' Edward, what did I do wrong?" she would ask. "Why can't I fit into the family? Why am I not good enough?" I would tell her every time, "You're perfect, Diana. The problem isn't with you." But the worst part was Diana blaming herself. She would say, "Maybe I married too young. Maybe royal life isn't for me." I would try to tell her, "You're a wonderful princess," but she didn't believe it anymore. Edward also told about Diana's struggle with the media. "Do you remember the periods when the paparazzi pursuit began?" Diana was really scared. She would say, "They're everywhere, Edward. I can't breathe easily." I would try to help her with security matters. I would tell her which exits to use, what times would be safer. But the real problem was the family not supporting her. While Diana was uncomfortable with media attention, the family saw this as her problem. Charles asked in pain, "Did we leave her alone, Edward?" "Unfortunately, yes, Charles. Diana was often struggling alone. I tried to be there for her as much as I could, but it wasn't enough." Edward's voice trembled even more. "Diana once told me, 'Edward, you're the most understanding member of the royal family. I wish everyone was like you.'" Edward shared his observations about the period before Diana's death. When her relationship with Dodi began, Diana was very happy. I hadn't seen her laughing like that for a long time, but the family didn't approve of this relationship. Diana told me, "Edward, I finally found someone who loves me, but nobody wants this." I told her, "Your happiness is important, Diana." Edward paused and told in more detail. There was a big change in Diana during that period. She was now more confident, more full of life, as if the weight she had been carrying for years had been lifted from her shoulders. When the first photos with Dodi came out, Diana called me. "Edward, the media has started again, but I don't care this time," she said. There was that joy in her voice that I hadn't heard for so long. But at the same time, I sensed she was also worried. She would say, "This relationship is bothering some people, especially Dodi being Muslim. They don't consider this suitable for the royal family." Edward's voice lowered even more. Diana once told me, "Edward, I'm free now. I'm making my own decisions for the first time, but this freedom scares some people." In the days before going to Paris, Diana was very excited. She had plans, she had dreams. She would say, "Maybe it's time to turn a new page." In our last conversation, she told me, "Edward, I'm happy, really happy. I haven't felt like this for a long time." But at the same time, there was also worry in her eyes. Charles's breath caught. "Did she tell you anything else about that trip?" Edward took a deep breath. "Just before going to Paris, she spoke with me privately. 'Edward, this trip is very important for me,' she said. 'Dodi and I will discuss our future. But then she paused and added, "If something happens to me, take good care of my children. Tell them how much their mother loved them. And Edward, you were my best friend. Never forget that." Edward's eyes filled with tears. I found those words very strange. I had asked Diana, "Why are you talking like this?" She had smiled and said, "I just want to be sure." Now, when I think about it, it was as if she had a premonition, as if she sensed what was going to happen. Edward told about that terrible day. When the news came, I was at Balmoral with the family. When the phone rang, Charles's face turned white as snow. Everyone was in shock, but I could only cry, because I really knew her. I knew what a special person she was. During the funeral preparations, while everyone was talking about protocol, I was only thinking about what Diana would want. Charles asked, "What did you think she would want?" "Her connection with the people. Diana always said, 'I exist for people, Edward, not for protocol.' At her funeral, when I saw all that crowd of people, I understood how right Diana was. She was truly the people's princess." Edward explained why he had remained silent for so long. "I kept these things for 27 years because Diana had asked me to. She would say, 'Edward, you're my confidant. Let this stay between us.' But I'm getting old now, Charles, and I see that Diana's memory is being treated unfairly. The media shows her as unstable, but the truth was nothing like that. Diana was a perfect mother, a compassionate person, a real princess, but nobody sees this side of her." Charles grabbed his brother's hand while crying, "Edward, you were a real brother to her. I failed." "No, Charles, you were also struggling with difficulties. What's important now is to properly honor Diana's memory." Charles was completely devastated after hearing what Edward told him. "Edward, how blind I was. I couldn't see what Diana was going through. While you were trying to protect her, I was neglecting her. This shows what kind of husband, what kind of person I was." Edward tried to comfort Charles. "Charles, we can't change the past, but we can properly honor Diana's memory. I'm trying to continue Diana's charity work. I support the project she started. This is my debt to her." Charles asked, "What do you suggest I do, Edward?" "Tell Diana's real story. Make sure everyone knows what a special person she was. Always tell your children how wonderful their mother was." After Edward's confession, a change began in the royal family. Charles called William and Harry and shared what Edward had told him. Both sons got to know their mother better by listening to Edward's stories. William thanked Edward. "Uncle Edward, thank you so much for what you did for my mother. I wish we had known about your presence back then." Harry also added, "My mother wasn't really alone. This gives me great relief." Edward smiled. "Diana's biggest dream was for you to be happy. Seeing both of you as successful men now would make her very happy." After long consideration, Charles decided to make a special statement about Diana with Edward's permission. "There are truths I learned from my brother Prince Edward about my late wife, Princess Diana. Despite the difficulties Diana experienced in the palace, there were people in the family who supported her. Edward was a brother who stood by Diana in her most difficult days, understood and supported her. This shows that Diana was not completely alone." This statement caused great repercussions in the media. Diana fans were very moved when they learned about Edward's support for Diana. Edward had been quietly continuing the charity work that Diana had started after her death. Support for AIDS patients, projects for homeless children, women's rights. Edward was doing these in Diana's memory. "These were the issues Diana cared about most," Edward would say. "It's my duty to complete the work she started." When Charles saw Edward's efforts, he decided to give him more support. The two brothers began developing joint projects in Diana's memory. Edward's confessions changed society's perspective on Diana. The hashtag #EdwardForDiana became trending on social media. People appreciated Edward's silent support for Diana. The media also began calling Edward Diana's silent guardian. Edward's confessions not only illuminated the past, but also gave direction to the future. The royal family decided to be more sensitive to the difficulties experienced by family members from now on. Edward's empathy toward Diana became an example. Charles also began applying what he learned from Diana in his marriage with Camilla. He tried to be a more understanding, more supportive husband. Edward was no longer afraid to break his silence. "Diana taught me that sometimes you need to speak," he would say. Prince Edward's 27-year silence showed his platonic but deep love for Diana. He had not spoken out to protect Diana, but had never left her alone. This story showed that real love is sometimes silent, but is always there. Edward had shown his love for Diana not with grand gestures, but with small but meaningful support. This truth that emerged 27 years after Diana's death proved that she was not really alone. At least one person had understood, supported, and loved her. Edward's confession was also a lesson for the royal family. When family members face difficulties, they should not be left alone. Empathy, understanding, and support are more important than protocol. Diana's memory became even stronger thanks to Edward's silent love, and this love became a legacy that would serve as an example for future generations. Silence is sometimes worth its weight in gold, but speaking at the right time is just as valuable. Edward had done both at the right time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss inspiring stories like this. See you in the next video.